The ballroom fell into silence, the kind that crackles with tension as my laptop screen lit up across the giant projector. Dozens of executives leaned forward in their seats, their champagne glasses suspended midair, while reporters' pens scratched furiously against their notepads. Line after line of time-stamped emails filled the screen. My drafts, my reports, my research. Every sleepless night, every sacrificed weekend, every ounce of my work laid bare for the world to see. My boss, David Clark, who had just boasted that my project was his brilliant idea, now stood frozen under the harsh glow of the spotlight. His face, once smug, now twisted in panic as the whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. She did all of it. He lied to us. He stole from her. The CEO, Robert Sinclair, turned his gaze from the screen to David, his jaw tightening, his expression carved in stone. Then his eyes shifted to me. His voice was low but carried across the room with unshakable authority. "Rachel Morgan, you and I need to talk. Immediately." In that instant, justice was no longer a dream. It was unfolding in front of hundreds of witnesses. I was never meant to be invisible. At least that's what my father always told me. "Rachel, your brilliance shouldn't hide in the shadows," he'd say, his weathered hands gently squeezing my shoulders. "The world needs people who build things that matter." But somehow, in the sleek corridors of Morgan & Clark Innovations, invisibility became my superpower. I moved through the open office like a ghost, my ideas flowing into the company. Bloodstream without anyone noticing the source. My desk, tucked into the corner of the 17th floor, offered a panoramic view of Boston that I rarely had time to appreciate. For 3 years, I had been a senior systems analyst, a title that meant everything on paper and nothing in practice. What I actually did was solve problems no one else could solve, develop systems no one else could envision, and quietly accept that David Clark would take credit for my best work. David was everything I wasn't: charismatic, effortlessly social, and blindingly confident. Where I second-guessed, he declared. Where I analyzed, he simplified. Where I created, he presented. "Morgan, I need those projections by Thursday," he said, leaning against my desk on a rain-soaked Monday morning, coffee in hand. His tailored navy suit seemed impervious to wrinkles, just as his reputation seemed impervious to scrutiny. I nodded without looking up from my screen. "I'm already halfway done." "That's why you're my favorite little genius," he chuckled, the sound hollow. "By the way, I mentioned your cost-saving algorithm to Sinclair yesterday." He was impressed. My fingers paused over the keyboard. "Did you tell him I developed it?" David's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Of course. Team effort, right? That's how we succeed around here." Team effort. The words had become a warning sign, a subtle signal that my contribution was being diluted, repackaged, and presented as a collaborative achievement led by David Clark. But this time was different. For 6 months, I had been developing something revolutionary, a predictive analytics system that would transform how the company managed resources, cutting costs by millions while improving efficiency across all departments. I called it Project Lighthouse because it illuminated previously invisible patterns in our operational data. It was brilliant. It was mine. And for once, I was determined to be recognized for it. The annual Boston Corporate Gala, just 3 weeks away, would be the perfect stage. The company's biggest clients would be there. Industry reporters, the board of directors, everyone who mattered would witness what I had built. That evening, as the office emptied and the sky faded from blue to violet outside my window, I stayed hunched over my keyboard, refining algorithms that would save the company from its own inefficiency. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Emma. "Still at work? Dad's asking if you're coming to Sunday dinner this week." I glanced at the clock. 9:43 p.m. "Tell him I'll be there, just finishing something important." "You always say that. He misses you." I felt the familiar pang of guilt. Since Mom died 2 years ago, Sunday dinners had become sacred, my father's way of keeping our small family connected. I had missed the last 3. "This time it's different, Em. This project could change everything for me." I put my phone down and returned to my screen, where lines of code reflected in my tired eyes. What Emma couldn't understand was that this wasn't just about career advancement. It was about reclaiming my voice in a place where it had been systematically muted. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual, coffee in hand, determination renewed. The office was empty except for the cleaning staff and one unexpected presence. David, sitting at his desk, staring intently at his monitor. "You're here early," I said, setting my bag down at my station. He looked up, momentarily startled. Just reviewing some presentations for next week. He closed, whatever he was viewing and smiled. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Project Lighthouse. A knot formed in my stomach. What about it? Sinclair loves the concept. He wants us to present it at the gala. My heart skipped. Us? David stood, straightening his tie. You've done incredible work, Rachel. But you know how these events go. The executives want the big picture, not the technical details. I'll handle the presentation. You'll be credited as the technical lead. Win-win. I'd like to present my own work, David, I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Look, Rachel, you're brilliant at what you do. But these people don't speak your language. They speak mine. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Trust me. I'll make sure you get the recognition you deserve. As he walked away, the knot in my stomach tightened. 3 years of experience told me exactly what recognition meant in David Clarke's vocabulary. A brief mention, a footnote, perhaps a handshake while he basked in applause. That afternoon, I noticed David had scheduled a meeting with Sinclair, without me. Later, he asked for my latest documentation to review. The next day, he requested access to all my development files to better understand the full scope. Red flags were raising everywhere, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I sent him what he needed, each file meticulously time-stamped and watermarked with my digital signature, a habit born of caution and experience. On Friday, passing the break room, I overheard David on his phone. Yes, the presentation is coming together beautifully. My vision for this system is finally taking shape. My vision. I stood frozen, coffee cup in hand as the pieces clicked into place. David wasn't preparing to present my work. He was preparing to claim it as his own. That night, as I drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, a strange calm settled over me. I had been here, before, watching my ideas being stripped of my name, packaged in David's confident rhetoric, and presented to applause I never heard. But not this time. Not with Project Lighthouse. This time I would be prepared. The days before the gala blurred together in a haze of preparation and growing dread. Each morning, I'd arrive to find David huddled with the marketing team discussing his presentation. Each evening, I'd leave with the weight of unspoken truth pressing on my chest. You need to confront him, Emma said over lunch on Thursday, her fork stabbing accusingly at her salad. We sat by the window of a small cafe near my office, the autumn sun casting long shadows across our table. I sighed, watching pedestrians hurry past. It's complicated, It's theft, she countered, her voice sharp with the protective instinct of a younger sister who had spent her life watching me retreat from confrontation. You've let him do this for years, and look where it's gotten you. Where it's gotten me is a stable job with excellent benefits, I said, though the words felt hollow even to me. Emma leaned forward, her eyes, so much like our mother's, fixing me with a look that stripped away my defenses. Mom would have told you to fight for what's yours. The mention of our mother hit me like a physical blow. Catherine Morgan had never backed down from anything in her life. Not cancer, not corporate politics during her own career, not even death itself, which she faced with a dignity that still humbled me. What would she think of me now, shrinking from this fight? I have a plan, I said finally, meeting my sister's gaze. But I need your help. That evening, Emma came to my apartment, where I laid out everything, copies of my original work, email exchanges with David, documentation with clear timestamps. Together, we compiled it all into a presentation that told an undeniable story of authorship and ownership. You really think you'll need this? Emma asked, watching me load the files onto my laptop. I hope not, I replied, though we both knew better. The night before the gala, my phone lit up with a text from David. Final review of the presentation tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Bring coffee. I responded with a simple, will do, then turned back to my laptop where I was finalizing my contingency plan. If David did what I feared he would, I needed to be ready. Sleep came in restless fragments that night, my dreams filled with faceless executives and endless corridors where my voice made no sound. I woke before dawn, my heart racing with a strange mix of dread and determination. The morning review session was worse than I had imagined. David had removed almost all references to me, presenting Project Lighthouse as his brainchild, with my role reduced to that of a technical assistant who had helped implement his vision. What do you think? He asked, seemingly oblivious to the theft laid bare between us. I forced a neutral expression. It's Comprehensive. I know, right? He grinned, closing his laptop. Sinclair's going to love it. The board will eat this up. I nodded, swallowing the words that threatened to spill out. Not yet, I told myself. Not here. The day crawled by. I answered emails mechanically, reviewed reports without seeing them, and tried to ignore the occasional congratulatory message from colleagues who had heard about David's big presentation at the GALA. At 5:30 p.m., I left to get ready, my emergency presentation safely stored on my laptop and backed up to 3 separate devices. Whatever happened tonight, I would be prepared. The Boston Plaza Hotel gleamed like a jewel as I approached, its historic facade illuminated against the evening sky. Limos and luxury cars lined the circular drive, disgorging executives in formal wear who moved with the easy confidence of people accustomed to power. I smoothed the fabric of my one good dress, midnight blue, floor-length, elegant, but understated, and squared my shoulders. The weight of my laptop in its slim case felt like both a burden and a shield. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, channeling my mother's strength as I climbed the marble steps. The grand ballroom took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers suspended from ornate ceilings, tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of orchids and roses catching the soft light. Nearly 300 people filled the space, the murmur of conversations and clink of glasses creating a symphony of privilege. I spotted David immediately. He stood near the stage, commanding attention in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, laughing with Sinclair and 2 board members. He caught my eye and waved me over with the casual entitlement of someone who had never doubted his place in rooms like this. "Rachel, there you are," he said, his hand settling briefly on my back as he introduced me. "This is the technical wizard I was telling you about. Couldn't have done it without her support." Support. As if I were a ladder he had climbed to reach his destination. "It's an impressive project," Sinclair said, nodding in my direction. "David's been talking about his concept for months, looking forward to seeing the full presentation." His concept. I smiled tightly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Yes, it's been quite a journey." The dinner portion of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. I picked at my seared salmon, barely tasting it as I watched David work the room, priming his audience for what was to come. Finally, Sinclair approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to our annual gala. Tonight we have something special to share, a revolutionary system that promises to transform how Morgan & Clark Innovations operates." The room quieted. My heart pounded in my ears. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our head of systems integration, David Clark, to present Project Lighthouse. Applause filled the room as David strode confidently to the stage. He buttoned his jacket, adjusted the microphone, and smiled out at the crowd, the picture of executive excellence. "Thank you, Robert. Good evening, everyone." My hand tightened around my champagne glass as he launched into his presentation, my presentation, with the practiced ease of someone born for the spotlight. "Project Lighthouse began as my vision for a more efficient future," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I recognized that our company was sitting on a goldmine of untapped data. Slide after slide of my work appeared on the screen behind him. My algorithms, my analytics, my countless hours of development, all now attributed to David Clark. "This wasn't easy," he continued, his expression appropriately humble. "It took months of conceptualization, planning, and execution. But I knew this innovation could revolutionize our operations." The executives nodded. The reporters took notes. The board members looked impressed. And something inside me finally broke. I set down my glass, picked up my laptop case, and began making my way toward the stage. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved through the crowd. Each step felt simultaneously too slow and too fast, as if I were moving through a dream where time had lost all meaning. Conversations hushed as I passed, curious eyes tracking my unexpected movement toward the stage where David continued his performance. "The beauty of Project Lighthouse is its predictive capability," he was saying, gesturing to a graph that had taken me weeks to perfect. "By analyzing historical data patterns, we can forecast resource needs with unprecedented accuracy, saving millions in—" He faltered mid-sentence as he noticed me approaching. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by a tight smile. "Rachel," he said into the microphone, attempting to maintain control, "did you want to add something about the technical implementation?" I didn't respond. The silence in the ballroom deepened as I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, my heels clicking against the polished wood. David's expression shifted from confusion to concern as I set my laptop case on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I apologize for the interruption, but there's something you need to see." David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What are you doing? We can discuss any concerns after the presentation." I met his gaze directly. "No, David, we're discussing it now." From the corner of my eye, I could see Sinclair straightening in his seat, his brow furrowed. The board members exchanged glances. A reporter from Tech Innovations leaned forward, sensing a story developing before her eyes. My fingers trembled slightly as I connected my laptop to the projector system. The screen behind us flickered, then displayed my desktop, a simple background with a single folder labeled Project Lighthouse Truth. "David has presented a compelling vision of Project Lighthouse," I said, addressing the room. "But there's a critical fact that has been omitted from his presentation." I opened the folder, revealing dozens of files meticulously organized by date. This project wasn't his vision. It was mine. Every algorithm, every line of code, every innovative solution, all of it was conceptualized, developed, and implemented by me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. David stepped forward, his smile now strained to the breaking point. "Rachel is an excellent team member," he said quickly. "Her technical contributions were invaluable, but the concept and direction were mine," I finished, opening the first document, an email dated 6 months earlier. The timestamp and digital signature were highlighted in yellow, impossible to miss. The projector displayed my original project proposal to David. "I've been thinking about a new approach to our resource. Allocation problems. I'm calling it Project Lighthouse because it would illuminate inefficiencies our current systems can't detect." This was my initial pitch, I explained, my voice growing stronger. Sent to David on March 12th, before any mention of this project appeared in company records. I clicked through to the next document. David's response. "Interesting concept, Rachel. Flesh this out." "More, and we'll discuss." The room had gone completely still. David's face had lost its color, his confident demeanor crumbling as I methodically displayed email after email, document after document, each one bearing my signature, each one earlier than his claimed conceptualization date. "April 17th, I continued, displaying a progress report. "My first functional prototype sent to David for review." I clicked again. "May 3rd, debugging notes on the predictive algorithm, the same algorithm shown in the presentation tonight." David moved toward me, his voice low and threatening. "You're making a serious mistake, Rachel." I didn't flinch. "No, David. I've been making a mistake for 3 years, letting you take credit for my work. Tonight, that ends." I displayed a final document, a side-by-side comparison of my original project specifications and the slides David had just presented. The similarities were undeniable, in some cases word for word identical. The whispers had grown louder now, rippling through the ballroom like wind through tall grass. I could see shock on some faces, disappointment on others, and on a few, particularly the women executives, something that looked like grim recognition. Robert Sinclair stood up, his authority commanding immediate attention. "David, is this true?" David's composure fractured completely. "Robert, she's taking things out of context. We worked on this together. My guidance shaped—" "That's not what these emails show," Sinclair interrupted, his voice glacial. He turned to me. "Ms. Morgan, how long have you been developing this project?" 6 months, sir," I replied. "I can provide access to all my development logs, early versions, and the Git repository showing every commit I've made since inception." A tech reporter from the front row called out, "Mr. Clark, do you have similar documentation to support your claim of authorship?" David's silence was deafening. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, executives demanding explanations, reporters calling out questions, PR staff frantically trying to manage the unfolding disaster. Through it all, Sinclair's eyes never left mine. There was something in his gaze I couldn't quite read. Anger, certainly, but also something like respect. "Rachel Morgan," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "My office. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Then he turned to David, whose face had morphed from shock to a dark, seething resentment. "You too, Clark. Don't even think about not showing up." I disconnected my laptop with hands that had finally stopped shaking. As I turned to leave the stage, I caught Emma's eye in the crowd. She had insisted on buying a ticket to support me. Her face shone with fierce pride, tears glistening in her eyes as she mouthed 2 words. Mom's watching. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Some people avoided me like I carried a contagious disease. Corporate politics made exposure dangerous. Others approached with quiet words of support or simple nods of respect. David had disappeared, presumably to nurse his wounded pride and prepare his defense for the morning. The presentation was officially postponed, though everyone knew it would never be rescheduled, at least not with David at the helm. As the crowd thinned, I found myself standing alone near the bar, the adrenaline of confrontation finally fading, leaving me exhausted but oddly peaceful. That took guts. I turned to find Amanda Chen, the company's legal counsel, studying me with shrewd eyes. It took desperation, I admitted. She smiled slightly. Sometimes they're the same thing. She set her empty glass on the bar. Sinclair's going to need a full report. Every email, every timestamp, every piece of evidence you have. I have it all. Good. She paused. You know there will be consequences. I'm aware. Not just for David. Her gaze was direct, unapologetic. What you did tonight, it violated protocols. Caused a scene at a major company event. I met her eyes steadily. Sometimes protocols protect the wrong people. Amanda held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. She turned to leave, then glanced back. And Morgan, bring your project notes. All of them. After she left, I gathered my things and headed for the exit. The night air felt clean against my skin after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. Boston's skyline glittered against the dark sky, a constellation of lights both familiar and somehow new, as if I were seeing it through different eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Coming over with ice cream and wine? No is not an acceptable answer. I smiled, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Whatever tomorrow brought, termination, litigation, or vindication, tonight I had finally stood up for myself. I had reclaimed my voice, and for the first time in years, I had used it to speak the truth. Sleep eluded me that night despite Emma's supportive presence and the comforting combination of Cabernet and chocolate ice cream. I lay awake until dawn, replaying the evening's events and preparing for what awaited me at Sinclair's office. By 7:30 a.m., I was walking through the Morgan & Clark lobby, dressed in my most professional suit, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, a silent declaration that I belonged in the executive spaces I was about to enter. The usual morning bustle felt surreal, as if I were moving through a parallel universe where everything looked the same but carried entirely different meanings. The security guard nodded with new respect as I passed. Word traveled fast. Morning, Ms. Morgan, he said. Quite a presentation last night, from what I hear. I managed a small smile. News travels fast. Always does. He lowered his voice. About time somebody stood up to Clark. The elevator ride to the executive floor, the 30th, felt endless. I clutched my leather portfolio containing printed copies of everything I'd shown the night before, plus additional documentation I hadn't had time to present. My laptop contained even more evidence, including video recordings of my development process that I'd made for my own records. When the doors opened, Amanda Chen was waiting, her expression unreadable. Right on time, she said, checking her watch. Sinclair's ready for you. She led me down a corridor of glass-walled offices to the corner suite where Robert Sinclair conducted the business of running one of Boston's fastest-growing tech companies. Through the transparent walls, I could see him at his desk, reviewing documents with intense focus. David was already there, seated rigidly in a chair across from Sinclair. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the defensive tilt of his chin. He didn't turn as we approached. Amanda knocked lightly on the glass door, then opened it without waiting for a response. Ms. Morgan is here, sir. Sinclair looked up, his expression grave. Come in, Rachel. He gestured to the empty chair beside David. Have a seat. The room was minimalist and imposing, all clean lines and muted colors with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the harbor. Family photos were conspicuously absent from Sinclair's desk, replaced by awards and a single bonsai tree, meticulously pruned. I sat down, placing my portfolio on my lap, acutely aware of David's refusal to acknowledge my presence. I've been reviewing the materials you provided last night, Sinclair began, tapping a folder on his desk. And I've asked HR to pull all relevant communications between the two of you regarding Project Lighthouse. His gaze shifted between us. I've also reviewed the company's intellectual property policies, which both of you signed when you were hired. David finally spoke, his voice tight. Robert, if I could explain— I'm not interested in explanations, David, Sinclair interrupted. I'm interested in facts. And the facts, as documented in these emails and development logs, appear quite clear. He turned to me. Ms. Morgan, according to these records, you conceived of Project Lighthouse on March 10th, developed the first prototype by April, and have been the primary, indeed the only developer since inception. Is that correct? Yes, sir, I replied. I can provide access to the Git repository showing every commit if you'd like further verification. That won't be necessary. Your documentation is comprehensive. There was a hint of something like admiration in his tone. He turned to David. Mr. Clark, these same records show that your contribution consisted primarily of receiving updates and occasionally providing feedback such as, and I quote, "Looks good, keep going." David's jaw clenched. The concept evolved under my direction. I provided the strategic vision that matches, word for word, Ms. Morgan's initial proposal. Sinclair finished. David, I've known you for 5 years. You're an excellent presenter and a skilled manager, but this— he tapped the evidence folder. This crosses a line that I cannot ignore. The tension in the room was palpable. Amanda stood by the door, silent but watchful, her legal mind no doubt cataloging every word for potential consequences. What happens now? I asked quietly. Sinclair leaned back in his chair. That's a complicated question with several components. He looked at David. Mr. Clark, effective immediately, you are being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation by our ethics committee. Please surrender your company credentials to security on your way out. David paled. Robert, you can't— I can, and I have. Sinclair cut him off. You're dismissed, David. We'll be in touch regarding next steps. For a moment, David looked like he might argue further. Instead, he stood abruptly, straightened his tie in a reflexive gesture, and strode toward the door without looking at me. As he reached for the handle, Sinclair's voice stopped him. And David, if I were you, I'd start looking for new employment opportunities. Regardless of the committee's findings, your effectiveness here has been compromised. The door closed with a soft click that somehow carried the weight of a slam. Silence settled over the room. Sinclair's attention returned to me, his expression softening slightly. Now, Ms. Morgan, we have a different set of issues to address with you. My heart sank. This was the moment I'd been dreading. The consequences Amanda had warned me about. Public confrontation, disrupting a company event, potentially embarrassing the firm in front of clients and media. Career suicide by most corporate standards. I understand, sir, I said, bracing myself. My behavior last night was unprofessional. I should have followed proper channels. Proper channels, Sinclair repeated, a hint of irony in his voice. Yes, the same channels that have apparently allowed this situation to develop unchecked for years. He sighed deeply. Rachel, may I speak frankly? Of course. What you did last night was unorthodox, potentially risky for the company's image, and absolutely necessary. His expression shifted to something I hadn't seen directed at me before, genuine respect. You demonstrated not only exceptional technical skill in developing Project Lighthouse, but also the courage to stand up for your work when traditional channels failed you. Both are qualities I value highly in my leadership team. I blinked, uncertain if I was hearing him correctly. Sir, we have a problem at Morgan & Clark, he continued. A culture that has allowed your contributions to be systematically overlooked while others took credit. That ends today. He pushed a folder across his desk toward me. This is a proposal I'd like you to consider. With slightly trembling hands, I opened the folder to find a formal offer letter. My eyes widened as I scanned the document. A promotion to Director of Innovation Technologies, a substantial salary increase, and direct reporting to Sinclair himself. No more middle managers, no more David Clarks standing between my work and recognition. The position would give you authority over Project Lighthouse and similar initiatives going forward, Sinclair explained. You would build your own, team, with full credit for your innovations. I don't know what to say, I managed, struggling to process this unexpected turn. Say you'll think about it, he replied. Take the rest of the week. Consider what you want your future at this company to look like. His expression turned serious again. And Rachel, while I admire your courage, next time you have concerns about intellectual property, theft, please come to me directly. My door is always open. Thank you, sir. I will. As Amanda escorted me back to the elevator, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Not only had I exposed David's theft, but I'd been offered a position that would have taken years to achieve through normal channels. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Amanda said quietly as we waited for the elevator. "Most whistleblowers don't get promoted, they get ostracized." "Then why did Sinclair?" "Because you didn't just expose a problem," she interrupted. "You created a solution too valuable to lose. Project Lighthouse works, doesn't it? It's everything you claimed?" I nodded. "Yes, it could transform how we operate." "Then you're not just a whistleblower. You're an asset." The elevator arrived and she held the door for me. "But Rachel, there will be people who resent what you did. David's friends, executives who don't like seeing the status quo challenged. Watch your back." As the doors closed between us, her final words hung in the air, a warning wrapped inside what should have been a moment of triumph. The elevator descended, and I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the past 24 hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Well?" I stared at the screen, wondering how to possibly condense everything that had happened into a simple message. Finally, I typed, "David's gone. I've been offered a directorship, and I think I just changed the rules of the game." 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "Holy shit, I'm buying champagne tonight. The good kind." I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket as the elevator reached the ground floor. As I stepped out, I caught my reflection in the polished marble wall. The same person I'd always been, yet somehow different. Stronger. More defined. For the first time since I joined Morgan & Clark Innovations, I walked through the lobby not as a shadow, but as someone who had claimed her rightful place in the light. The days following the gala unfolded in a blur of meetings, congratulations, and whispered conversations that ceased when I entered rooms. I had become a living case study in corporate politics, the quiet analyst who'd publicly exposed her boss's deception and emerged not only unscathed, but elevated. 3 days after the confrontation, I accepted Sinclair's offer. The following Monday, I moved into my new office on the 28th floor, a glass-walled space with views of the harbor that made my old cubicle seem like a distant memory. "Not bad for a week's work," Emma said, helping me arrange my few personal items on the expansive desk. She picked up the framed photo of our mother and placed it prominently beside my computer. She would have been proud. Dad certainly is. I don't think I've ever seen him brag so much at his poker night. I smiled, still adjusting to this new reality. "It doesn't feel real yet." "Oh, it's real," Emma replied, gesturing to the nameplate on my door. "Rachel Morgan, Director of Innovation Technologies. And judging by the looks you're getting from the executive assistants, you're the most interesting thing to happen around here in years." She wasn't wrong. The company Grapevine had worked overtime, with versions of the gala confrontation growing more dramatic with each retelling. In some accounts, David and I had engaged in a shouting match. In others, Sinclair himself had escorted David from the building that very night. The truth was less theatrical, but no less significant. A systematic pattern of intellectual theft had been exposed, and the company had been forced to address it publicly. The official statement, crafted by PR and legal, described the incident as a misunderstanding regarding project attribution that had been swiftly resolved in accordance with company values of innovation and integrity. David's departure was announced separately as a decision to pursue other opportunities, corporate speak that fooled no one. By Wednesday of my first week as director, I had assembled the core team for Project Lighthouse's final development phase. Mei Lin, a brilliant data architect whose ideas had been consistently overlooked. James Washington, a systems engineer who had quietly helped me debug several critical algorithms. And Tyler Rodriguez, a UX designer whose innovative interface concepts had been repeatedly shelved by his previous manager. "I've chosen each of you for a reason," I told them during our first meeting. "You're not just technically exceptional, you've demonstrated creativity and resilience in an environment that hasn't always recognized your contributions." They exchanged glances, uncertain what to make of this unusual introduction. "Under my leadership," I continued, "that changes. Every idea will be attributed to its creator. Every contribution will be acknowledged. And when Project Lighthouse launches, your names will appear alongside mine in all official documentation." May leaned forward. "Is that why you stood up to Clark? Because he took credit for your work?" The directness of her question caught me off guard. The room fell. Silent, my new team waiting for an answer that would define my leadership more clearly than any corporate mission statement. "Yes," I said simply. For 3 years, I watched my ideas become someone else's achievements. Project Lighthouse was the breaking point. I looked at each of them in turn. I don't expect any of you to take the kind of risk I took, but I do promise that while you're on my team, your work will be recognized as yours. The tension in the room dissolved, replaced by something I hadn't anticipated: relief. These were people who had experienced the same frustrations I had, the same invisibility, the same erasure of their contributions. That's all we've ever wanted, James said quietly. The meeting shifted into a detailed technical discussion, but something fundamental had changed. They weren't just employees assigned to my project. They were allies in creating a different kind of workplace culture. Not everyone was as supportive. Passing the executive dining room at lunch, I overheard Mark Daniels, VP of Operations and David's longtime friend, speaking loudly enough to ensure I would hear. Complete disregard for protocol sets a dangerous precedent when people can just publicly ambush their superiors. I paused, considering whether to confront him, when Amanda appeared beside me. Not worth it, she murmured, guiding me away. Daniels is just worried you'll inspire his team to start asking questions about who really develops their market analyses. Are there others who feel like Mark does? I asked as we walked toward the elevator. Of course, she replied matter-of-factly. You disrupted the natural order, Rachel. Some people benefited from that order. She pressed the button for the 28th floor. But you have more allies than you realize, especially among the women who've watched this pattern play out for years. Over the following weeks, this divided response became increasingly apparent. Senior male executives were cordial, but reserved, treating me like a volatile element that might explode if mishandled. Meanwhile, women across departments began stopping by my office, ostensibly to discuss Project Lighthouse, but often to share their own experiences of having ideas appropriated or contributions minimized. It's like you opened a door that we all knew was there, but were afraid to touch, explained Diane Fletcher, a veteran product manager, during one such conversation. You've changed things, Rachel, not just for yourself. The pressure of these expectations weighed on me as we prepared for Project Lighthouse's official launch. The system was performing beyond even my initial projections, identifying efficiency opportunities that would save the company an estimated $12.7 million in the first year alone. But success wasn't guaranteed, and failure would validate every skeptic who believed my promotion had been premature or politically motivated. 6 weeks after the gala, I received an unexpected invitation. Dinner with Robert Sinclair at Menton, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. Such personal attention from the CEO was rare, especially for someone so new to the executive ranks. The restaurant was intimate and elegant, with soft lighting that flattered the diverse clientele of politicians, old money Bostonians, and corporate elite. Sinclair was already seated when I arrived, examining the wine list with the focused attention he brought to quarterly reports. Rachel, he stood as I approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for joining me on such short notice. Thank you for the invitation, I replied, settling into the leather seat. Though I admit I was surprised. He smiled slightly. I make it a point to have dinner with all my direct reports within their first quarter. Helps me understand who they are beyond the resume. He closed the wine menu. But in your case, there's something specific I wanted to discuss. My stomach tightened. Project Lighthouse? The launch is proceeding on schedule, and the latest stress tests. This isn't about Lighthouse, he interrupted gently. At least, not directly. This is about David Clark. The mention of David's name sent an unexpected chill through me. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in weeks, as if the company had collectively decided to erase him from its institutional memory. What about him? I asked. Carefully. Sinclair studied me for a moment before answering. He's filed a lawsuit against the company, and against you personally. The sommelier appeared with a bottle of red wine, momentarily halting our conversation. I sat in stunned silence as he poured 2 glasses, describing notes of cherry and oak that I couldn't focus on enough to appreciate. When we were alone again, Sinclair continued. He's claiming defamation, wrongful termination, and, most ironically, intellectual property theft. According to his filing, you misrepresented the collaborative nature of Project Lighthouse and deliberately undermined his leadership to advance your career. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's absurd. The evidence is overwhelming in your favor, Sinclair finished. Amanda has already filed a motion to dismiss most of the claims, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not through company gossip. He took a sip of his wine. David's always been driven by pride as much as ambition. This lawsuit isn't about winning. It's about saving face. Will it affect the lighthouse launch? I asked, my mind racing through potential complications. No, that proceeds as planned. Which brings me to the other reason for this dinner. Sinclair leaned forward slightly. The board is impressed with your work, Rachel. Not just the technical achievements, but how you've led your team. There's talk of expanding your division after the launch, giving you oversight of all innovation projects company-wide. The conversation had whiplashed from career-threatening lawsuit to unprecedented opportunity. So quickly that I struggled to process both. That would be a significant expansion. It would, he agreed. And it would put you in direct competition with Mark Daniels for resources and attention. His expression turned serious. The corporate ladder isn't just about climbing, Rachel. It's about who tries to knock you off as you ascend. As our main courses arrived, I realized this. Dinner wasn't simply a courtesy. It was Sinclair's way of preparing me for the next phase. One where David's lawsuit would be just the first in a series of challenges from those who saw my rise as a threat to the established order. Why tell me all this? I asked finally. Why not let me find out about the lawsuit through legal channels? Sinclair considered his response carefully. Because 6 weeks ago, you showed the courage to stand up for what was rightfully yours. That kind of integrity is rare, and I want to see how far it can take you. He raised his glass slightly. Consider this dinner a warning and an opportunity, all wrapped in an excellent Bordeaux. I raised my own glass in response, understanding for the first time that my victory at the gala hadn't been an ending. It had been the opening move in a game I was only beginning to learn how to play. The lawsuit landed like a grenade in my carefully constructed new life. Though Sinclair had prepared me, seeing the formal complaint, with its deliberate distortions and outright fabrications of events I had lived, made it viscerally real in a way our dinner conversation hadn't. This is standard legal strategy, Amanda explained during an emergency meeting in her office the following morning. He's painting himself as the victim of a subordinate's calculated power play, rather than as someone caught stealing credit. She shuffled through the documents spread across her desk. The good news is that the evidence is overwhelmingly on your side. The bad news is that lawsuits like this aren't really about winning in a court. They're about reputation, I finished, understanding dawning. He's trying to create doubt about what happened. Exactly. And doubt is all some people need, especially those already inclined to believe his version. She selected a particular document and handed it to me. This is our formal response. I've moved for an expedited dismissal, but David's attorney will fight to drag this out. As long as possible. I skimmed the legal language, my attention catching on a particular paragraph. Plaintiff Clark deliberately and systematically misrepresented defendant Morgan's intellectual property as his own, as evidenced by documented communications and development logs spanning 6 months. Seeing it laid out so plainly brought back the humiliation and frustration I'd felt watching David present my work as his own. But now, those emotions were tinged with something new. Anger at his refusal to accept consequences, and determination not to let him derail everything I'd built. What do I need to do? I asked, setting the document down. Focus on your work. Let me handle the legal side. Amanda's expression softened slightly. And Rachel, be prepared for this to get personal. David knows you, your strengths, your insecurities. He'll try to use that knowledge against you. Her warning proved prescient. Within days, colleagues began approaching me with uncomfortable questions sparked by rumors circulating through the company. Had I really threatened David before the gala? Was it true I'd been romantically involved with him and sought revenge after being rejected? Had I manipulated the timestamps on my documentation? Each rumor was more absurd than the last, yet each required a measured denial that felt increasingly exhausting. Even more frustrating was watching certain executives, particularly those in Mark Daniels' circle, treat these rumors as plausible, their previous professional respect cooled by calculated doubt. It's working, I told Emma during our weekly dinner at her apartment. Not with everyone, but enough to make a difference. People look at me differently now. Of course it's working, she replied, refilling my wine glass. Character assassination always works to some degree. That's why people do it. She sat back, studying my face. The question is, are you going to let it stop you? I thought about Project Lighthouse, now just 3 weeks from launch. About my team, who had thrown themselves into finalizing the system with a dedication that humbled me. About the women across the company who had quietly told me how much my stand had meant to them. No, I said finally. But I need to do more than just deny the rumors. I need to change the conversation. The next morning, I called a meeting with my team. When they had assembled in the conference room, I closed the door and spoke with complete candor. "I'm sure you've all heard about David Clark's lawsuit and the rumors it's generating," I began. "I could ask you to ignore them, but that would be disingenuous. Instead, I want to address them directly, then focus on what really matters." For the next 15 minutes, I systematically dismantled each rumor, providing context. And, where possible, evidence that contradicted David's narrative. I didn't vilify him or portray myself as a blameless victim. Instead, I simply presented facts with the same clarity I brought to technical problems. The truth, I concluded, is that this lawsuit is a distraction from our work, from our launch, from what we're trying to build here, and I refuse to let it define us or this project. May spoke first after a moment of silence. "So what do? Just pretend it's not happening?" "The opposite," I replied. "We make Project Lighthouse so undeniably brilliant that it drowns out everything else. We deliver a system so transformative that when people hear my name or yours, they don't think about lawsuits or rumors. They think about what we built." The energy in the room shifted, determination replacing uncertainty. For the next 2 hours, we refined our launch strategy, identifying ways to make Lighthouse not just functional, but revolutionary, a system that would become inseparable from its creators' reputations. As the meeting concluded, James lingered behind. "There's something else we could do," he said quietly. "Something that might help counter the narrative David's creating." "I'm listening." "Documentation. Not just of the project, but of our process." He pulled out his tablet and opened a file. "I've been recording our development meetings. With everyone's consent, of course. We have dozens of hours showing how ideas evolved, who contributed what, the collaborative spirit you've fostered." I stared at him, understanding immediately. "You want to release these internally?" He nodded. "A curated selection, focused on the most innovative breakthroughs. It would show exactly how this team operates under your leadership, the opposite of what David is claiming." The suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting David's narrative directly, we would present an alternative so compelling and well-documented that his claims would seem not just false, but absurd. "Let's do it," I decided. "But we release it the week before launch, when everyone is already paying attention to Lighthouse." The strategy worked better than I could have hoped. The development footage, showing our team's collaborative problem-solving in real time, became must-watch content throughout the company. Emails poured in from departments I'd barely interacted with, expressing admiration for both the technical innovations and the team culture captured in the recordings. More importantly, the conversation shifted. People stopped asking me about David's accusations and started asking about Lighthouse's capabilities, implementation timelines, and potential applications across departments. By launch week, the lawsuit had receded to background noise, overshadowed by anticipation for the system's debut. Even Mark Daniels, who had been notably cool toward me since the GALA, requested a preview demonstration for his operations team. The night before the official launch, I stayed late, running final diagnostics and reveling in the quiet satisfaction of seeing something I'd created prepare to take its rightful place in the world. As I was gathering my things to leave, a notification appeared on my screen, an email from legal. My heart rate accelerated as I opened it, expecting another development in David's lawsuit. Instead, I found a brief message from Amanda. "Rachel, just received word from Clark's attorney. They're offering to withdraw the lawsuit in exchange for a joint statement acknowledging mutual contributions to Project Lighthouse and a private financial settlement. Company funded, not from you personally. In my professional opinion, they've seen the momentum behind Lighthouse and realized they're fighting a losing battle. Sinclair wants your input before we respond." "Amanda." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the implications. David was retreating, looking for a face-saving exit that would allow him to walk away with some dignity and compensation. The practical choice, the easy choice, would be to accept, to end the distraction and close this chapter definitively. But something in me rebelled against the idea of acknowledging mutual contributions that had never existed, of allowing even a diplomatic fiction to rewrite the truth of what had happened. I typed a response that would shape not just the outcome of the lawsuit, but the standard I was setting for my leadership and my life. "Amanda, thank you for the update. While I understand the pragmatic benefits of settlement, I cannot in good conscience agree to language that misrepresents the development of Project Lighthouse. I remain open to resolving this matter efficiently, but not at the expense of truth. The joint statement would need to accurately reflect events as documented in our evidence. If that's unacceptable to Mr. Clark, I am prepared to proceed to trial. Rachel Morgan. I sent the email, then stood at my office window, watching the lights of Boston shimmer against the darkening sky. For 3 years, I had compromised, accommodated, and diminished myself to navigate a system that wasn't designed for people like me. That ended now. My phone buzzed with a text from Sinclair. Received your response to Amanda. Bold stance. You sure about this? I typed back without hesitation. Completely sure. His reply came seconds later. Then we stand with you. Get some rest. Tomorrow belongs to Lighthouse. And to you. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since the gala. Whatever came. Next, the launch, the lawsuit, the challenges of leadership, I would face it with the confidence of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for claiming what was rightfully hers. The truth was my foundation now, and I refused to build anything else upon shifting sand. The Project Lighthouse launch was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the company's largest presentation space, a sleek auditorium that could accommodate 300 people. By 9:30, every seat was filled, with latecomers lining the walls, an unprecedented turnout for a system launch. I stood backstage, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my carefully chosen outfit, a tailored cobalt blue suit that projected confidence without ostentation. My team huddled nearby, running through final checks on the demonstration system. Server load is stable, James reported, eyes on his tablet. Visualization module responding perfectly. May adjusted her collar nervously. I still think we should have practiced the Q&A section more. We know this system inside out, I reassured her. We built it. There's no question they could ask that we can't answer. Tyler glanced toward the curtain. Full house. Sinclair's in the front row with the entire executive committee. And some faces I don't recognize, James added. Definitely not company people. Industry press, I explained. Sinclair invited them. He's positioning Lighthouse as Morgan & Clark's flagship innovation. I didn't add what Amanda had told me earlier, that David's attorney would also be watching, evaluating how today's reception might impact their legal strategy. A production assistant appeared with a 5-minute warning. I gathered my team in a close circle, aware that this moment represented something profound for all of us. Whatever happens next, I said quietly, remember that we built something extraordinary together. Something true. Something ours. I met each of their eyes in turn. Now let's show them exactly what that looks like. The lights dimmed as we took our positions on stage. The audience quieted, faces illuminated by the soft glow of the presentation screen. Sinclair approached the podium first, his presence commanding immediate attention. Innovation isn't just about technology, he began. It's about vision, seeing possibilities where others see only problems. It's about persistence, pushing through obstacles that would deter lesser minds. And sometimes it's about courage, standing up for your ideas when it would be easier to stay silent. His gaze found me in the wings. Project Lighthouse embodies all these qualities, largely due to the leadership of one remarkable individual. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Innovation Technologies and the creator of Project Lighthouse, Rachel Morgan. The applause that greeted me as I walked onto the stage wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic, even admiring. In that moment, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the woman who had caused a scene at the gala or the subject of unsavory rumors. I was a leader about to unveil a system that promised to transform the company. For the next 45 minutes, my team and I guided the audience through Lighthouse's capabilities, the predictive algorithms that optimized resource allocation, the visualization tools that made complex data patterns immediately comprehensible, the integration protocols that would allow seamless implementation across departments. When we demonstrated how the system had already identified over $15 million in potential savings, nearly 20% higher than our initial projections, audible gasps rippled through the room. The executives in the front row leaned forward in their seats, expressions ranging from surprised to calculating as they mentally applied these figures to their own departmental budgets. The technical presentation transitioned into practical applications, with each team member highlighting specific use cases relevant to different company divisions. I watched with quiet pride as May, James, and Tyler commanded the stage with growing confidence, their expertise undeniable, their contributions impossible to overlook or minimize. When we opened the floor for questions, hands shot up throughout the auditorium. The inquiries were sophisticated, engaged, occasionally challenging, exactly what you would expect from an audience genuinely excited by innovation. Mark Daniels, who had been notably silent during the presentation, finally raised his hand. The room quieted slightly, aware of his historical alignment with David and his initial skepticism about my promotion. "Ms. Morgan," he began, his tone carefully neutral, "the efficiency gains you're projecting are impressive, but they would require significant process changes across your multiple departments. How do you plan to manage the inevitable resistance to such changes?" It was a fair question, touching on the human element that often undermined technical solutions. I stepped forward, meeting his gaze directly. "You're right that technical solutions alone aren't enough. Change management is crucial, which is why we've developed implementation protocols specific to each department's culture and workflow." I gestured to the screen where a new slide appeared. "These aren't just imposed from above. They're collaborative frameworks designed with input from team leaders at every level, including several from your division, Mr. Daniels." His eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "You've already consulted with my operations team?" "Over the past 3 weeks," I confirmed. "They provided invaluable insights that shaped our approach. Their names and contributions are detailed in the implementation documentation, which will be distributed this afternoon." Something shifted in his expression, a grudging reassessment. He nodded once, more to himself than to me, and made a note on his tablet. The session concluded with Sinclair announcing an accelerated rollout schedule, beginning with finance and operations, a clear vote of confidence in both Lighthouse and the team behind it. As applause filled the auditorium, I caught sight of Amanda at the back of the room. She gave me a subtle thumbs up, then gestured toward a man in a charcoal suit who was already heading for the exit, David's attorney, leaving earlier than expected. The post-launch reception buzzed with excitement as executives and department heads approached our team with congratulations and implementation questions. I circulated through the crowd, fielding inquiries and introductions, acutely aware that many of the people now eager to align themselves with Lighthouse had been notably distant during the weeks of rumors and uncertainty. "Quite a different reception than you're used to," Sinclair commented, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to me. "How does it feel?" I considered the question as I surveyed the room. My team engaged in animated conversations with senior leaders, reporters taking notes, Amanda deep in discussion with 2 board members. "It feels," I searched for the right word, "validating, but also strange. The system hasn't changed since yesterday, but suddenly everyone sees its value. People follow success," Sinclair replied pragmatically. "And right now, you're the very definition of it." He lowered his voice. "Clark's attorney left halfway through your presentation. Amanda just received word that they want to reopen settlement discussions. No mention of mutual contributions this time. The news should have felt like victory, but instead, I felt a curious emptiness. David's lawsuit had consumed so much mental and emotional energy that its imminent resolution left a strange void. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you," Sinclair said. "The board approved the division expansion we discussed. Starting next month, you'll have oversight of all innovation projects company-wide." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Unless recent events have made you reconsider." I thought of my father's words, spoken so many years ago. "Rachel, your brilliance shouldn't hide in the shadows." For too long, I had allowed others to dim my light, to reduce my voice to a whisper. Those days were over. "I'm not going anywhere," I assured him. As the reception wound down, I found a moment alone with my team. "Thank you," I said simply, "for believing in Lighthouse, for standing with me through everything." "You set the example," May replied. "You showed us it was possible to fight for recognition and win." "Not just win," James added. "Change things. The way people are already talking about implementation, making sure everyone involved gets proper credit, that wouldn't have happened 6 months ago." Tyler nodded in agreement. "You didn't just launch a system today, Rachel. You launched a different way of doing business." Later that evening, as I drove to my father's house for a celebratory dinner, I called Emma from the car. "How does it feel to be Morgan and Clark's newest superstar?" she asked, her voice warm with pride. I laughed, still adjusting to the idea. "Surreal, but good. Really good. Dad's been cooking all day. Fair warning, he invited half the neighborhood to toast your success." Of course he did. Our father, always ready to celebrate his daughter's achievements as if they were national holidays. I wouldn't have it any other way. As I pulled into the familiar driveway of the modest suburban home where I'd grown up, I caught sight of my father at the kitchen window. He was smiling, watching for my arrival with the same proud expectation he'd shown at every science fair, every graduation, every milestone, large and small. Some victories weren't measured in promotions or project launches, I realized. They were measured in the simple dignity of being seen, truly seen, for who you are and what you can create. I had finally reclaimed that dignity, not just for myself, but for everyone who would come after me. And that was a triumph beyond anything I could have imagined on that fateful night at the gala, when I first decided to stand up and speak my truth. 6 months after the lighthouse launch, spring had transformed Boston from winter gray to vibrant green. From my office window, I watched sailboats dot the harbor, white triangles against blue water beneath an impossibly clear sky. The view wasn't the only thing that had changed. My expanded division now occupied the entire 28th floor, with a team that had grown from 3 to 15. Project Lighthouse had been fully implemented across all departments, exceeding even our optimistic projections for efficiency and cost savings. The lawsuit that had once threatened to define my career had ended with a whimper, not a bang. A confidential settlement that included no admission of wrongdoing, but required David to acknowledge my role as primary architect and developer of the system. He had subsequently left Boston entirely, accepting a position with a rival firm in Seattle. I was reviewing quarterly performance metrics when Amanda knocked on my open door. "Got a minute?" she asked, looking uncharacteristically pleased about something. "For you?" "Always." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's up?" She sat down and slid a glossy magazine across the desk. Page 36. I flipped to the indicated page and found myself staring at my own photograph beneath the headline, "The Innovators 30 Under 30 Transforming Tech." The accompanying article detailed my work on Project Lighthouse, describing it as a breakthrough in resource optimization with applications far beyond its original corporate environment. "Congratulations," Amanda said. "Public vindication in the most literal sense." I skimmed the article, noting with satisfaction that May, James, and Tyler were all mentioned by name, their contributions specifically outlined. The team will be thrilled. Have they seen this? Not yet. Sinclair thought you might want to share it with them yourself. She leaned back in her chair. There's more. The feature caught the attention of several major tech firms. 2 have already reached out about potential collaboration opportunities, including MKT Systems, a new voice added. I looked up to find Robert Sinclair standing in my doorway, holding a folder. "MKT is interested in licensing Lighthouse for their global operations," he continued, entering the office. "Their CEO called me personally this morning. It could be the beginning of an entirely new revenue stream." The implications were enormous. MKT Systems was a tech giant with operations in 23 countries. A licensing deal with them would transform Lighthouse from an internal efficiency tool to a marketable product with potentially massive reach. That's significant, I managed, my mind already racing through the adaptations we'd need to make, the scalability challenges, the intellectual property considerations. "It's revolutionary," Sinclair corrected, "and it's just the beginning." He placed the folder on my desk. "The board has approved the formation of a new subsidiary focused exclusively on developing and marketing Lighthouse-derived technologies. They want you to lead it." I opened the folder to find a detailed proposal for Lighthouse Innovations, Inc., a semi-autonomous entity under the Morgan & Clark umbrella, with its own budget, development team, and profit-sharing structure. "This is a lot to process," I said, scanning the document. "Take time to think it through," Sinclair advised. "It's a significant step. Building something from the ground up always is." He smiled slightly. "Though I think we both know you're more than capable." After they left, I sat alone in my office, the proposal open before me, the magazine still showing my face among transforming innovators. The trajectory from overlooked analyst to potential CEO of a tech subsidiary seemed impossible, yet here it was, tangible, real, mine for the taking. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Have you seen the magazine? Dad's buying copies for everyone he's ever met." I smiled, imagining my father proudly showing my article to neighbors, friends, random strangers at the grocery store. Just saw it. Things are moving quickly here. Big decisions ahead. Good big or scary big. She replied. "Both. I'll tell you over dinner." "Your place tonight?" "Absolutely. Wine and wisdom coming up." I put down my phone and turned back to the harbor view, considering the choice before me. Leading the subsidiary would mean building something entirely new, my vision, my rules, my name front and center. After years of working in the shadows, the opportunity was undeniably appealing. But it would also mean leaving behind the team I'd assembled, the culture we'd created together, the changes we were still implementing throughout Morgan and Clark. Was I ready to step away from that work? Still very much in progress? My contemplation was interrupted by May, who appeared at my door with an urgent expression. Rachel, we have a situation with the HR implementation. Their legacy database isn't communicating properly with our integration module. I set aside the proposal. Show me. We spent the next 2 hours troubleshooting the issue, working side by side with members of both teams. The problem turned out to be a simple compatibility error, but the process of solving it highlighted something I had almost taken for granted: the collaborative environment we had built, where questions were welcomed, credit was shared, and solutions emerged through respectful exchange of ideas. As the teams dispersed after resolving the issue, Mark Daniels approached me in the hallway. Our relationship had evolved from cool professionalism to genuine respect over the months since the Lighthouse launch. Heard about the MKT interest, he said, and the subsidiary proposal. News traveled fast, even for confidential board decisions. Word gets around. He nodded. It's a good opportunity. You'd be excellent at it. He hesitated, then added, but what you've built here, the culture, not just the technology, that's harder to replicate than any algorithm. Worth considering before you decide. Coming from Mark, who had once been firmly in David's camp, the observation carried particular weight. I thanked him and returned to my office, his words lingering in my mind. That evening, over pasta and wine in Emma's cozy apartment, I laid out the options before me. So you could either run your own company or keep changing the one you're in, she summarized, refilling our glasses. Classic entrepreneur's dilemma. It's not exactly my own company, I corrected. It would still be under the Morgan and Clark umbrella. But it would be yours in all the ways that matter, she pointed out. Your name, your vision, your rules. She studied me across the table. The question is, which path lets you do the most good with what you've learned? That's exactly it, I admitted. The subsidiary would let me build something from scratch, without the baggage of old systems and politics. But at Morgan and Clark, I could keep changing things from within, opening doors for people who might otherwise be overlooked, like I was. Emma considered this. Remember what Mom always said about true leadership? I smiled at the memory. Our mother, practical and wise, had dispensed life lessons like others offered casual observations about the weather. That it's not about the position you hold, but the impact you have on others. Exactly. Emma leaned forward. So which choice creates the most positive impact? That's your answer. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Sinclair. We sat in his office, the subsidiary proposal between us on his minimalist desk. I've made my decision, I began. I'm honored by the offer to lead Lighthouse Innovations, but I'm declining. His eyebrows rose slightly. May I ask why? Because my work at Morgan and Clark isn't finished, I explained. The culture change we've started, recognizing contributions, fostering collaboration, creating space for overlooked voices, that's still taking root. If I leave now, there's no guarantee it will continue. Sinclair studied me with newfound respect. Most people would jump at the chance to run their own show. I'm more interested in changing the existing one, I replied. But I do have a counter-proposal. I outlined my vision, expanding my current division to include mentorship programs for promising employees from underrepresented groups, transparent attribution policies for all company projects, and collaborative development frameworks that could be replicated across departments. This isn't just about Lighthouse anymore, I concluded. It's about building an environment where the next Rachel Morgan doesn't have to fight so hard to be heard. For a long moment, Sinclair was silent, his expression thoughtful. Then he nodded slowly. It's less flashy than launching a subsidiary, but potentially more transformative in the long run. He extended his hand. Draw up a formal proposal. You have my support. 3 weeks later, I stood before a room of newly hired analysts and engineers, bright, diverse faces filled with the same ambition and uncertainty I had felt when I first joined Morgan and Clark. They had been recruited specifically for an expanded Lighthouse initiative, but they represented something far more significant: the future I was helping to shape. Welcome to Innovation. Technologies, I began. You're here because you each bring unique perspectives and talents to our work. I want to be clear from day one. In this division, your ideas belong to you. Your contributions will be recognized. Your voice matters. I saw skepticism in some eyes, hope in others. They had no reason to believe me yet. Promises were easy, action harder. But as I outlined our projects and, philosophy, I noticed something shifting in the room. A collective straightening of shoulders, a new attentiveness, the first fragile tendrils of trust beginning to form. After the orientation, I returned to my office to find a small package on my desk, a gift box with no card. Inside was a miniature lighthouse carved from pale wood, exquisitely detailed, with a small bronze plaque on the base that read, "For those who light the way." Later, I would learn it had been a collective gift from my original team, May, James, and Tyler, commissioned from a local artist. But in that moment, holding the delicate carving, I was struck by its perfect symbolism. A lighthouse doesn't journey across the ocean or command the waves. It stands steady, casting light through darkness, helping others find their way through treacherous waters to safe harbor. Its strength lies not in movement, but in constancy, in being exactly where it's needed, exactly when it's needed. That evening, as I placed the carving on my desk beside the photo of my mother, I felt a profound sense of rightness about my decision to stay. The subsidiary would have been a personal triumph, but what we were building within Morgan and I, Clark, was something rarer and more valuable, a legacy that would outlast any single project or person. My phone rang, Emma checking in. "So, day 1 of the expanded division, how'd it go?" I gazed at the wooden lighthouse, catching the last rays of sunset through my office window. "It was a beginning," I said. "A good one. Mom would be proud," she said softly. "Dad certainly is." "I know," smiled, thinking of how far I'd come from that tense night at the gala when I'd finally found the courage to claim what was mine. But the best part? This time I'm proud too. As twilight deepened outside my window, I understood that the true victory hadn't been the confrontation or the promotion or the industry recognition. It had been finding my voice and using it not just for myself, but for others still struggling to be heard. "When you stand for the truth," I whispered, echoing words that had guided me through the darkest moments of uncertainty. Even whispers can roar louder than applause. And in offices throughout the building, those whispers were already growing stronger, carried forward by those brave enough to speak and those wise enough to listen.